all of you know today, if any of you go in the national domestic airlines, what is the maximum weight you can carry? And 15 kilos usually, but it was 20 kilos sometime earlier. Okay. Many of you know international travel, how much is the maximum you can carry? No, maximum, one box maximum 32, 30, 20, 23 and 32. Okay. Where did all these numbers come from? Okay, this is an example of a very, very interesting participatory action research process that was done by the Union of Load Carriers. Okay. So there is a person, is a Brazilian researcher called Vera Statten Coelho, who was actually called by the International Union of Porters from different countries, working with different airlines, who sat down and talked to her about their problems. Now, she then with discussion, evolved a participatory strategy where the problem definition was by the workers. They said, listen, it's too much of carrying. But then how do you then define what is the optimum, so on and so forth. So then there was a process of actually measuring tiredness, measuring this one after different weights, and the workers themselves monitored and everything, did data collection and so on, and it was a huge sample, because you can understand this was a cross country, transnational, all unions got together. So when they went with their recommendations to the industry, to the airline industry, there was very little the industry could do. Okay, of course, I'm not saying the whole change was because of that, but underlying this change. So I'm just giving this example to give you an idea that even the nursing study, for example, now emotional and material are two important things, but it will be important for us to take that idea of how do you measure the material. So even, for example, a very simple thing like doing a number of hours on duty chart, you understand, and actually showing the amount of overtime they are doing. So what I am trying to say is, participatory action research, you have to have certain, it's not just emotion, it's not just ki yaar hum sab we are all very angry, so let's put all that anger together and then bring about change. No, it is a systematic process. It is about, for example, in Cuddalore it was, yes, okay, what are the n number of symptoms you are all having, of which stink came out as then you take it back. Go back and say, how can you measure stink? So how can you describe it? Then they said, we have 36 descriptions. Then can you quantify it? Okay. Then once you can describe it and quantify it, now can you monitor it? After 300, 400 episodes were, so there is a certain process. Okay, and probably you didn't have enough time to go through that process, but what I would foresee, and as Sanjay rightly pointed out, you first need to have a group that is, ready to take this process on. So assuming the nursing association, the nursing unions are willing to do that, you will then have to work out what are those practical opportunities that they are willing to monitor, they are willing to evolve or develop a set of, say, information or evidence on. Okay, and it is based on that, then one takes your whole process forward. So it may be overtime, it may be anything. There's a study that we did, again using principles of PIR, with manual scavengers. Now manual scavengers, as you all know, still exists, and this is in Karnataka. We did in Raichur, and we did it with a group of manual scavengers, and we did a very simple sort of process where at every week one of the sort of union members, again the process was, there's a long process, I am just going right to what we measured. So there was a process by which the union offered 2 volunteers. They would meet these initial 20 people we chose for the first part of the study, and just say, over the last week, what were all the injuries or health problems you faced? that's all, and they just fill up in a diary, 20 people over 14 weeks. So we actually had quite a number of person days in terms of thing. And can you guess what was one of the biggest problems that manual scavengers were facing? Road traffic accidents. Exactly, because they used to do their work around 2 or 3 in the morning, at which time people are just zoomed down the roads, and the number of hit and runs that were taking place. Okay, now just to this example was just to bring about to you all that PAR is not emotion, please. PAR is, I mean, I don't like to use the word hard science, but there is a commitment to systematically documenting evidence. The point is what evidence, how I do it, for what sake, those are all, you know, slightly more, I mean, more democratic, you know, but here we actually sat down with the manual scavengers, discussed with them, do you know what are the issues that are faced? They said, you know, we have a lot of problems. Okay, what are those lot of problems? You know, then one said, you know, headache, one said stomachache, then said, okay, shall we now do it in a process? And you know, so there was a whole process. The point is that there is a process. So please don't go away with the idea that PAR is, you know, there is a process, and you know, that rigor is as much as important as the democracy and as the partnership and the, you know, equity in power and all of that. Without that, you know, this would just not, I mean, it would just be, there would be very different from it, from, you know, any, I mean, just you know, movement, घेराव करो, आंदोलन करो, PAR करो, उसमें क्या फर्क है? I think at some point फर्क होना चाहिए, वो अलग बात है. I mean, you have to have a difference, but there is a difference, and at least we start with that. So when you say that participants increase control over their lives, now increase control over their lives is actually a very sort of romantic nature issue today, because who is controlling? I mean, today we talked, na, the आशा का ये CMO है, CMO का BMO, BMO का DMO, finally Bill Gates. So you know, when you then do that, where do you begin to control? I mean, you know, at what level can you legitimately, can a community control? Which is exactly what I think you also brought out about the community in Cuddalore. Yes, we are able to control no new industry, but till now there has not been major impact on rethinking whether polluting industries, the whole illegality of the fact that polluting industries were there in a residential community, that has not been challenged, you know. So there are, I think, very serious limitations, and I think one is absolutely, one needs to get in to PAR with that very clearly. It is going to be impossible, seriously, but the point is that one is hoping that by creating awareness of the, you know, legitimacy of the demand, by creating a sense within higher powers that the, you know, the groups underneath are actually thinking differently, wanting, one hopes that that will actually in a way destabilize the system enough for change. Now again, that has issues that we will discuss, I mean, slightly later on, but yes, there are issues, it's not as simple. I think this is a real issue, and in Cuddalore we have faced it. So shall we go to the MLA or not? You know, shall we go to the MP or not? No, but we didn't vote for him. He is a DMK, I am ADM. No, these are very, very real issues. In this reality, what we struggled to keep was a legitimate communication with the community, that listen, this is our inputs to you, this is our relationship with you. Now to go to the MLA, to go to the MP, to decide what to do, to whom to go to, was left completely with the communities to take their call. I mean, we made it very clear that if you tell us to come to the MLA and give a report, we will come, but we are not going to. So we made it very clear as a group of researchers, okay, that we are not going to be drawn into the politics, the local issues. But if the community decides, you know, no, we are going to go to the MLA or we want to go to the panchayat, then that is, I think, there, I mean, there we don't. So at some point, you know, that we have to take a call. So, but at the same time realizing that we don't see electoral politics as dirty politics necessarily, but yes, it is, we don't know, we are not vested in that process, so we will get sucked into it without knowing. They are locals, they know how to navigate it, so let them. So it was, I mean, there have been mishaps, there have been sort of thing, but yeah, we muddle along. Let's just go through these 6 principles. Participatory, engaging cooperate members of the joint process, okay, co-learning, okay. Yeah, yeah, they seem to fit in, right? Okay, it is. So I think you go back to the question, I think really, is it value neutral? Would this be the sort of approach? There would be, let's look at it this way. Suppose you were to say, I would actually take these policy makers and make them swim in Jadugoda Lake, for example, you know, literally, you know, participate, I mean, you know. So I think the point is that how does one privilege, again, okay, again this is maybe an important issue, and going back to what Kabir asked, I think there is a certain commitment within participatory action research to start off from the person who is at a disadvantage. Okay, it's always the disadvantaged person. Again, that was I think why the first group sort of emphasized the nurse, because and they took time and effort to say why they feel the nurse is the disadvantaged, and then take that view as, you know, taking forward. Now you would have to define why you feel the policy maker is the disadvantaged group to typically get on to a PAR cycle. Now, for example, the people who work in sections, department sections, so section officers have approached us saying, listen, you know, we write these policies, and we've actually sat with section officers helping them writing policies, and then the policy goes up and then comes back completely, you know, upside down. You know, and then we've actually worked with groups of section officers trying to say, you know, how do you, you know, make sure that you insert little things that are, you know, innocuous, but then actually, so those are all, but I don't know whether that would come in strictly into PAR. I mean, PAR would be a process of understanding problems, would be a process of problem, you know, sitting down together, defining the problem together, coming up with attempts at, you know, collecting evidence or collecting information that will be used by that community to, you know, solve a problem. And so I think that would be really the cycle that one needs to think through. Yes. Right. So I think one of the critical aspects of ethics, okay, and I'll start with an issue that that I heard recently. There is one person who's doing a number of projects with the participatory approach, who said, listen, this whole ethics, you know, is so irritating because they just don't understand what we are doing. Okay, everything is like biomedical ethics in terms of, you know, so the whole development of the field of ethics has largely been around clinical trials, around, you know, research on human subjects and so on and so forth. That this whole question of participation and of, you know, being partners and being equal, you know, empowerment and all of that, how do you measure? I mean, you know, sometimes you have a community and that's going to have a huge backlash, for example. I mean, Cuddalore, I mean, a number of times the industries have actually sent gundas into these communities, and, you know, all of those are there. I mean, I may not have mentioned it specifically, but yes, that has also happened. I mean, you know, when we go to do a medical checkup, for example, you know, there was a police recently in one of the communities. The police came and you know, confiscated the mobile X-ray machine, saying, "Aap, you know, kyun, kahan se, kisse permission liya? What are you doing?" You know, then we had to deal with the police. And so there's backlash. What I'm trying to say. So then, you know, how do you understand what is a risk to the community? How do you understand what is a risk to the researcher? How do you understand informed consent, for example, what we were discussing yesterday? So I think these are all very real issues. Now, it's not enough to say that this is not biomedical research, therefore ethics do not, you know, you don't have to follow those ethics. I think the issue is that there have to be ethical checks and balances, and I think there is no moving away from that. But those ethical guidelines, those ethical principles have to be aware of the process that is going on. So, you may not necessarily have a signed informed consent form, but that does not do away with the ethical responsibility of informed consent. Now, how you do it, whether it is done at one sitting or it is done over a process, that can change, but you cannot say I do not need consent, which was a point that it was made very clearly in the ethnography session, that it is not that you do not need consent, you do. So, I think some of the issues that are there that have come up from ethical practice, participative practice, have just been listed here. So, first is the question of who represents the community. So, when we say participatory action research, when I kept saying the Cuddalore community, who in the Cuddalore community decides? Is it the women? Is it the men? Is it the Dalits? Is it the contract laborers? Is it the permanent workers from that who are working? Each of them have a different approach. And as researchers, when we enter a community, I think all of us are clear enough to understand that this romantic nature of community, no, the community does not exist. It is a fractured, deeply fractured community that is there. Now, in this situation, when I say that I am working with the community, who is that who represents the community to me? When you say you are working with the nurses, which nurses are you working with? In nurses there is BSc nurses, there are diploma nurses, there are permanent nurses, there are contract nurses. Do you understand? Now, the point is that at some point there has to be an appreciation of the heterogeneity of power within the community. Yes, there is power in the researcher, but there is also power in the community, and how are you dealing with that power is also a very clear ethical question, because you are taking a decision for the community based on a representative. So, there is an ethical dilemma, there is a very clear ethical issue here. Then, which leads to the second question, whose interests are driving the process? Again, within the community or within the researcher and the community. So, at some point, if I feel that the community is not active enough, can I push as a researcher? No, let us do little more research, let us, So, there is an ethical question. If I say no, we are equal partners, then who drives the process in a particular direction? Where do I take over? Where is that fine line between me sitting down and saying, okay, I will participate with you, and where is it that I push the process? And I think these are very, very fine lines when one is doing a community, a participatory process. Managing privacy and protecting information. This is very, very fascinating. Surekha talked about abortion. We were doing an issue, we were doing a, I was sort of peripherally involved with a group that was doing verbal autopsies. So, communities were doing verbal autopsies around maternal deaths and then trying to collect that information and use it for advocacy and change. Okay, they were using participatory methods in that. Now, the question was, one of the questions they want to know is, did that mother who passed away, died, was she a victim of domestic violence? Now, where do you ask that, get that information from? She's dead. Who do you ask? Do you understand? Now, there is an ethical issue here. There is privacy. Now, everybody, maybe many people in the community know that there was domestic violence. But is it okay that we bring that out in a community process? Okay, but she's dead. So, but still, so there are very issues. Did she have an abortion? If it's an abortion-related death, it's one thing to say कि हाँ community में सबको सब कुछ पता है यार. I mean, there is no need to get into all of this. But then there is a commitment on privacy. So, how do you balance that out? Okay, again, no answers. But I think every participatory process researcher has to agonize over these. And till one does that, I think you have not like tension on how evidence and analysis is documented and reported. So, I am very excited about the Cuddalore process. I want to publish this now. But people in Cuddalore are not interested in sitting down with me and giving me the information. They want to write a report for their MLA in the local newspaper. I mean, you understand. Now, who do I, at what point, I mean, yes, of course, you can do both and you can do many more. But the point is, who do you privilege? Who do you prioritize? When do you prioritize? When are those, questions reached? I found something very, very interesting which I want to do, but the union breaks up. What happens? Okay. So, these are all very practical issues, the tension over how this whole thing, and of course, social risks. And then that, I think, is one of the biggest ethical issues that all of us grapple with. At what point do we say ki but we are only researchers, we don't have a stake in the community. Ki when the gundas come, when the police comes and stands in the community, then we say no, हम researcher है भाई, हम सिर्फ participate करने के लिए आए हैं, अपना तुम्हारा power है, तुम ले लो, हम भाग जाएंगे. I think that is a very real issue. Ki at what point of time do we say ki our responsibility is research? And if we don't say it, I mean in terms of we say ki no, we are not only research, then are we researchers or are we activists? So, where do we cease to be researchers? Where is there an activist role? Is there something called a researcher activist? Do you understand? So, I think, but these are all real issues that I think at least I have not worked out in practice. It is, I think, we muddle through. Every time we go, we agonize over it, we lose sleep over it, we come up with solutions for that process, for that day. And we keep learning, hopefully, and as much as possible minimizing risk on all sides. I mean, I think that's the only honest, real answer I can give you to any questions on these. But yes, the point is that you cannot say there are no ethical considerations for a PAR project. I think that is a take-home message. That is just not acceptable. Every process that you do has to go through ethical review, but of course, the considerations of ethics will be different. The way in which you assess a process may be slightly different from. Okay. Again, consent in PAR, this is a big issue. Now, usually, because we are dealing with communities as a whole, because communities invite us usually to come into a process, it is assumed that the community organization that invites us has in a way given us consent. I mean, okay. Now, even as I say that, the problem with that is that because communities are not homogeneous, because there are power differentials within communities, obviously there may still be people within the community who do not want to take part in it. Okay. So, I think the point really is that any process has to have a reiteration of the fact that, listen, this is a process, and if at any point of time people amongst you are uncomfortable, please, tell us whatever. But usually the dynamics are very, very different in PAR processes compared to other, ethnography or other, issues, because there is not necessarily an ongoing action. In many of these places, for example, in Kodaikanal, there is an ongoing court case, there is a struggle. In Cuddalore, there is an ongoing struggle, there is an andolan. In Jharsuguda, other places, the environmental struggle, there are ongoing struggles. So, very few times people say we don't want to be part of it. I mean, they are desperate for it. Now, in such a situation, what does consent mean? It's, I'm not saying there is no consent, but one has to, be a little more aware of what, one does, and usually one finds communities. But at every point of time, it is important that, there may be women who feel very frightened about taking part in, or men, or, and you keep those options open, opt out at any point of time. Okay, I'll end with a poem, the question of whose perspective, and I think that's again the value neutral sort of question. So again, this is from another favorite poet of mine called Eduardo Galeano. Some of you may have heard of him, so and also would have heard of this poem. It's called The Nobodies. So he's saying fleas dream of buying themselves a dog, and nobodies dream of escaping poverty. That one magical day good luck will suddenly rain down on them, will rain down in buckets, but good luck doesn't even fall in a fine drizzle. No matter how hard the nobodies summon it, even if their left hand is tickling, or if they begin the new day with the right foot, or start the new year with a change of brooms, the nobodies, nobody's children, owners of nothing, the nobodies, the no ones, the nobodied, running like rabbits, dying through life, screwed every which way, who don't speak languages but dialects, who don't have religions but superstitions, who don't create art but handicrafts, who don't have culture but folklore, who are not human beings but human resources, who don't have names but numbers, who do not appear in the history of the world but in the police blotter of the local paper, the nobodies who are not worth the bullet that kills them. Thank you very much. And finally, to end with Paul Farmer, who was talked about yesterday, that the divorce of research and analysis from pragmatic efforts to remediate inequalities of access is a tactical and moral error. It may be an error that constitutes in and of itself a human rights abuse.